Welcome all, friends, disciples, and devotees, to the reading for September 29th, 2020, on the Divine Help again. From the Mother. Our human consciousness has windows that open upon the infinite, but generally men keep these windows carefully closed. We have to open them wide and allow the infinite to enter us freely in order to transform us. Two conditions are necessary to open the windows. One, ardent aspiration. Two, progressive abolition of the ego. The divine help is assured to those who set to work sincerely. This Mother wrote in December 1971. Then she writes, wherever there is sincerity and goodwill, the divine's help also is there. The rest is from Sri Aurobindo. And he writes, if you want to change, you must first resolutely get rid of the defects of your vital being, persevering steadily, however difficult it may be, or however long it may take, calling in always the divine help, and compelling yourself always to be entirely sincere. You have to stand back from the feeling of suffering, anguish, and apprehension. Reject it and look quietly at the resistance, applying always to yourself your will to change and insisting that it shall be done and cannot fail to be done now or later with the divine help, because the divine help is there. It is not that there is anything peculiar to you in these difficulties. Every sadhak entering the way has to get over similar impediments. It took me 4 years of inner striving to find a real way, even though the divine help was with me all the time. And even then, it seemed to come by an accident. And it took me 10 more years of intense yoga under a supreme inner guidance to trace it out. And that was because I had my past and the world's past to assimilate and overpass before I could find and found the future. I have said, follow my path, the way I have discovered for you through my own efforts and example. Transform your nature from the animal to the spiritual. Grow into a higher divine consciousness. All this you can do by your own aspiration and by the force of the divine Shakti. That, if you please, is not the utterance of a madman or an imbecile. I have said, quote, I have opened the way. Now you, with the divine help, can follow it, end quote. I have not said, quote, find the way for yourself as I did, end quote. You are simply asked to follow the leader and guide with the divine help and with courage in the face of whatever difficulties come. The outer being can grow in faith, fidelity to the divine, reverence, love, worship, and adoration. Great things in themselves, though in fact these things too come from within. But realization can only take place when the inner being is awake with its vision and feeling of things unseen. Till then, one can feel the results of the divine help, and if one has the faith, know that they are the work of the divine. But it is only then that one can feel clearly the force at work, the divine presence, the direct communion. Speaking of a person, Sri Aurobindo writes, in her condition, the one thing by which she can enter into the sadhana is to remember the divine always, taking her difficulties as ordeals to be passed through, to pray constantly and seek the divine help and protection, ask for the opening of her heart and consciousness to the supporting divine presence. To another sadhak. I can understand the shock your wife's catastrophic death must have been to you. But you are now a seeker and sadhak of the truth, and must set your mind to rise above the normal reactions of the human being and see things in a larger, greater light. Regard your lost wife as a soul that was progressing through the vicissitudes of the life of ignorance, like all others here. In that progress, things happen that seem unfortunate to the human mind, and a sudden accidental or violent death, cutting short prematurely this always brief spell of terrestrial experience we call life, seems to it especially painful and unfortunate. But one who gets behind the outward view knows that all that happens in the progress of the soul has its meaning, its necessity, its place in the series of experiences which are leading it towards the turning point where one can pass from the ignorance to the light. He knows that whatever happens in the divine providence is for the best, even though it may seem to the mind otherwise. Look on your wife as a soul that has passed the barrier between two states of existence. Help her journey towards her place of rest by calm thoughts and the call to the divine help to aid her upon it. Grief too long continued does not help, but delays the journey of the departed soul. Do not brood on your loss, but think only of her spiritual welfare. Not to be disturbed, to remain quiet and confident is the right attitude. But it is necessary also to receive the help of the mother and not to shrink back for any reason from her solicitude. One ought not to indulge ideas of incapacity, inability to respond, dwelling too much on defects and failures, and allowing the mind to be in pain and shame on their account. For these ideas and feelings become, in the end, weakening things. If there are difficulties, stumblings, or failures, one has to look at them quietly and call in tranquilly and persistently the divine help for their removal, but not to allow oneself to be upset or pained or discouraged. Yoga is not an easy path, and the total change of the nature cannot be done in a day. For those who have within them a sincere call for the divine, however the mind or vital may present difficulties, or attacks come, or the progress be slow and painful, even if they fall back or fall away from the path for a time, the psychic always prevails in the end, and the divine help proves effective. Trust in that and persevere. Then the goal is sure. This character of our actually realized being, and therefore of our yoga, imposes on us certain limitations and primary difficulties, which can only be overcome by divine help or an arduous practice, and in reality, only by the combination of both these aids. I have not come here to accomplish miracles, but to show, lead the way, help in the road to a great inner change of our human nature. The outer change in the world is only possible if and when that inner transmutation is effected and extends itself. You must not expect to establish a perfect samga all at once and by a single leap. Go forward calmly and firmly, not attached to success, not disturbed by unsuccess. My divine help will then never fail you. Namaste.